Part 28. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 274. Yujukin was floating quietly, his clothes were tattered and hanging on his body, and a streak of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Reading. And the Chaos Ancestral Dragon, which evolved from his Xuanhuan domain, had completely collapsed and turned into a majestic aura, spreading on the moon. Opposite Yujukin, a hideous and twisted huge figure was looming in the dense fog, staring at Yujukin, ready to attack again at any time. The momentum of both sides entangled and collided with each other, and the boundless power enveloped the surrounding area, pressing the people below, who were a little breathless. Is this the captain's true strength? They have always known that Yujukin's strength realm is to surpass theirs. However, they have always felt that no matter how strong Yujukin is, he will not be much stronger than them. After all, they are both in the realm of breaking the void, so how much difference can there really be? However, they never expected that Yujukin's strength would reach such a level. Just the simple aura and pressure made them feel a little breathless. For a moment, they were all a little speechless and stunned. However, it was not just them. Those people on Blue Star who watched the live broadcast were also equally shocked. At that moment, I thought I was going to die. Such a powerful force, even through the screen, I feel a little suffocated. You can imagine, if it was on the scene, what kind of scene would it be? I am afraid that not to mention being hit by their attacks, even the aftermath of their attacks, or even just their momentum and pressure, may suppress us to death. Hey. So, in the battles between those strong, the best choice for us weak people is to hide as far as possible, so as not to be shocked to death by the aftermath of their battles. Weakness is the original sin. I must work hard to break through the realm as soon as possible and condense my own domain. Yo. There is still a little master in the realm of heaven and man here. Ha ha ha, you're welcome. You're welcome. Your realm must be not weak either. Ha ha, not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning. I just condensed the domain. After speaking a word, this person was silent. There are similar remarks all over the internet, including those foreign websites. And this time, not many people stood up to criticize. After all, the existence fighting with Yujukin is obviously not human. If you make sarcastic remarks at this time, it will be a question of the position between humans and those monsters. Yujukin and his friends at this time are naturally unaware of the remarks on the internet. At this time, they are all very nervous, staring at the monster opposite Yujukin. If it weren't for those eroded humans, they would also be stunned by the aftermath of the battle. Even because their essence is not the real realm of breaking the void, they have not recovered until now. They may all be caught off guard and suffer heavy damage from those eroded humans. After all, those humans eroded by the mist, but they don't have any extra emotions such as shock. They only have the instinct to attack. Hurry up. Yujukin stared at the opposite side with his eyes, but secretly sent a message to everyone, indicating that everyone should leave here quickly. The group gritted their teeth, and the Yuanli in their bodies surged up instantly, turning into streams of light in an instant, heading towards the space channel in the distance. Everyone knew that they could not help at all in a battle at the level of Yujukin and his group, and rushing forward recklessly would only hinder them. In this case, it would be better for them to retreat first, so that Yujukin could concentrate on fighting the enemy and even wait for an opportunity to evacuate. His %*@%. Just as everyone was escaping, a series of strange roars sounded, reaching the ears of everyone present and ringing in everyone's hearts. Several people flying in the distance swayed and almost fell to the ground. Even Yujukin was confused, but fortunately it was only a moment, and the Yuanli in his body was running spontaneously, and a faint dragon roar resounded in his heart, causing him to quickly shake his head and recover. Although the strength of the people who were flying was not as good as Yujukan, they were at the same extremely high level after all. Although they had not yet reached the point of contact with the rules, they had finally come into contact with some of the rules, and finally managed to resist the influence of the strange sound. Not only them, but also those who had been eroded by the fog, also did not escape the influence of the sound. In other words, the attack of this strange sound was an indiscriminate attack, regardless of friend or foe. Even because the realm of those who were eroded was originally low, they had already been eroded, and were more seriously affected by the sound. After the sound came out, those who had seen the team members retreat, those who had just recovered and wanted to catch up, stopped their actions in an instant, and their expressionless faces began to twitch violently. As the strange sounds continued, those who had been eroded not only had faces that became hideous and distorted. Even their bodies began to twitch violently, even through the clothes. One piece after another of bulges crawled and moved on their bodies, and the clothes on their tops rose and fell. Finally, with a sizzling sound, the clothes on these people were completely torn apart, revealing the bodies underneath the clothes. However, their bodies had completely lost their human form. Flesh whiskers grew out of their bodies, twisting and entangled with each other, constantly merging and splitting. Gradually, these people turned into ferocious monsters, crawling on all fours, with flesh whiskers hanging down from their bodies like hair, constantly twisting and wriggling. A ferocious and ugly human face grew on the bodies of these monsters, and dark eyes locked onto the people who were flying, and wanted to jump up again to catch up. However, Yujukan, who had recovered from the sudden sound, would not let them succeed. Ang! A dragon roar resounded, instantly shocking the minds of these monsters, and a vivid and spirited dragon took shape in Yujukan's palms. As Yujukan pressed down with both palms, the dragon in his palm flew out in an instant, accompanied by the sound of dragon roars, and rushed directly to the monsters below. This time, Yujukan had no intention of holding back. He held back before because although they were controlled, Yujukan and his men did not know whether they could recover again, so they naturally restrained their hands and feet when they attacked, and did not want to hurt their lives. But this time it was different. Those people had obviously been completely deformed into monsters, and Yujukan naturally could not hold back again. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 275. Ang. Bang bang bang. Boom. Boom. With a high-pitched dragon roar and a series of dull explosions, all the deformed monsters were blown away by the dragon. In the end, this Vitality Realm dragon directly hit the moon and made a violent explosion, even the entire moon shook slightly. On the other side, feeling the slight trembling under their feet, the faces of Wangshu and the other moon gods all changed immediately. They have just finished their discussions and want to make the moon their foundation in this world. A fierce battle broke out over there, and it even began to affect the overall stability of the moon, which naturally aroused their vigilance. Boom. Click. Click. And just when they were alert, the moon was already shaking more violently, and there was even a sound of the earth breaking, and wide ravines spread from the place of battle to the surroundings. But it turned out that Yujukan had once again fought with the twisted and ferocious monster. Dragon-shaped chi energy shot out one after another, constantly colliding with the monster, erupting with violent sounds. Boom. Finally, a fierce collision broke out between the two sides. The space was distorted, the earth cracked, and Yujukan flew backwards quickly. While flying upside down, Yujukan's palms began to quickly gather vitality, and a chaotic colored dragon shadow meandered in the mass of vitality. Ang. Yujukan's palms were pushed back violently, and he rushed towards the monster again. Bang. After the monster hit again, Yujukan took advantage of the situation and flew straight towards the sky. And the chaotic dragon shadow condensed by it immediately followed the movement of his palm and rushed behind him quickly. Boom. Accompanied by a shocking loud noise, the stable space door shattered in a burst of violent fluctuations. No. Captain. The group of people who had just passed through the space passage looked at the space passage behind them that quietly disappeared after a wave of fluctuations. Their eyes turned red and they shouted loudly. Others in the base were also slightly stunned, wondering why Yujukan wanted to destroy the space channel. But the next moment, they understood why. Due to the direct hit by Yujukan's powerful attack, the space channel on the other side of the moon was not like the one on the blue star base side. It only caused a slight ripple and then quietly dissipated. I saw that the space passage on the other side of the moon, after being violently destroyed by Yujukan, immediately caused chaos in the surrounding space, with the power of space spreading out and shattering the surrounding space. And at this moment, due to the fragmentation of the surrounding space, a long tentacle hidden in the void suddenly appeared and was directly crushed by the power of the space, completely annihilated into nothingness. Hi-ho! A monster that was just about to sneak into the space channel quietly appeared in the void, and suddenly retreated away from the broken space area. Obviously, this monster is also extremely afraid of the damage caused by space fragmentation. After letting out a painful roar, countless eyes opened instantly on his body and locked on Yujukan. Damn! What kind of monsters are these? Looking at the densely packed eyeballs, Yujukan felt his scalp numb and cursed secretly in his heart. Feeling the strange numbness on his body, as if something was about to grow out of his body, Yujukan couldn't help but speed up the flow of energy in his body again to curb the distortion of his body. Chaos! At the same time, Yujukan burst out with a loud roar, and the domain instantly spread, covering hundreds of meters in radius. It's not that he can't cover a larger area, it's just that it's not necessary. Expanding the area has no other benefits besides spreading his power. It would be better to narrow the scope of the field and concentrate stronger power. The domain is covered, and a hazy power of chaos spreads, as if you have really arrived in chaos. Of course, this is definitely not the case in fact. This is just a mixture of several kinds of power, with several kinds of power attributes at the same time. It is far from true chaos. Otherwise, as long as Yujukan's domain has any trace of chaos, he can draw down the weakened and diluted chaos energy from Yuan Meng's chaos to strengthen his domain. However, although Yujukan's realm of chaos has nothing to do with real chaos. However, it is more than enough to isolate the influence of the outside world, and it can completely suppress the body that wants to be distorted. After isolating the inside and outside of the field, Yujukan instantly hugged his hands, and the energy surged out of his body. In an instant, a dazzling energy ball appeared between the palms of his hands. And with the continuous influx of Yuan Li, the energy ball shines brighter and brighter. At the end, the space around the energy ball began to twist slightly, and electric snakes snaked and jumped around it, making bursts of thunder and buzzing sounds. Wan Long Chao Kang. The voice was vast and ethereal, and the energy ball between Yujukan's palms was pushed toward the top of his head. After leaving his palms, the energy ball suddenly collapsed, and then suddenly expanded. Ang! With a vast and low dragon roar, a vivid dragon of vitality instantly jumped out of the energy ball, and instantly turned into a 100-meter-long dragon, winding around Yujukan. And this was just the beginning. Next, one after another dragon appeared, winding around Yujukan in Yujukan's domain. But in just a moment, Yujukan's domain was already full of dragons. And in the energy ball, there were still a steady stream of dragons. Explode. Looking at the countless dragons, Yujukan's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and as soon as he thought about it, the countless dragons had already rushed to the surroundings below. Boom! Boom! It may sound like a long time, but in fact, it only took a blink of an eye from the opening of the domain to the countless dragons rushing out. After those dragons rushed out, no matter what they touched, they all exploded instantly, and the terrifying shockwaves spread out in all directions one after another. Even the two monsters that appeared in the mist were blown all over in an instant and were thrown away fiercely. And the moon below suffered an unexpected disaster, and was directly blown out with huge pits and deep gullies that quickly spread out in all directions. Under this uninterrupted continuous explosion, even the entire moon was shaking violently at this moment, and it seemed to be out of its inherent orbit and even had a tendency to break. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 276. Amidst the rumbling self-destruction of countless divine dragons, the area around Xuanhuan shrank in an instant, turning into a sphere of about 2 meters, barely covering his figure. Read. And in the next moment, the sphere transformed from the domain was like a cannonball, shooting high into the sky at an astonishing speed. Even the shock waves of the continuous explosions below were unable to catch up. Looking at the continuous explosions below and the two bombarded monsters, Xuanhuan couldn't help but smile. Hey, the entire moon is so big, why do I have to leave through that space passage? Across space, we can still return to Blue Star. Looking at the explosion below again, Xuanhuan slowly raised his head, and his already extremely fast figure sped up a few points again. If it weren't for the space here, which had been shaken extremely unstable by the continuous explosions, Xuanhuan would have wanted to break through the space and leave the moon directly through space. Boom! Bang! However, just when Xuanhuan was delighted that he was about to escape and ascend to heaven, his rapidly rising figure suddenly seemed to hit an invisible barrier. Immediately after making a loud noise, his whole body was bounced back hard like a rubber ball. Grass. Xuanhuan only had time to utter a curse word before he flew back like a cannonball at a faster speed, heading straight towards the opposite side. In the end, it hit the surface of the moon hard and crashed into the depths of the ground, leaving only a deep hole in place, making the moon tremble again. The next moment, the two blood-drenched and miserable monsters, like two shadowy fish, slid silently through the void and arrived at the place where Xuanhuan fell. Moreover, their injuries were also recovering at an astonishing speed. In just a few moments, their wounds had healed. Even the dark blood flowing out was quickly flowing back and reintegrating into their bodies. Xuanhuan was lying in the deep pit, with streams of blood constantly flowing out of the corners of his mouth. Looking at the monster figure that suddenly appeared in the small hole above, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Xuanhuan felt like crying. When he fought with the monster, he was not seriously injured. On the contrary, it was because of his cunning operation that he was severely cheated. But speaking of it, I can't blame myself for this. Who would have thought that when I and others landed on the moon, there was no difficulty and they landed on the moon easily? However, when he wanted to leave, an invisible barrier suddenly appeared above him. If the invisible barrier simply prevents him from passing through, who would have thought that the barrier would actually have a strong counter-shock force? The speed of his full sprint, hitting the barrier with extremely strong repulsive force, is basically equivalent to withstanding the force of his full collision, plus the repulsive force of the barrier. Taken together, there is not much difference from being hit by an attack twice as strong as his own. It just knocked him so badly that he almost lost his breath. If he hadn't been prepared for this, he would have covered his whole body with the realm of chaos. I'm afraid that the sudden impact would turn his body into a puddle of mud, and he would die on the spot. However, judging from the current situation, it seems that there is not much difference. If it's fine under normal circumstances, with my own recovery speed, I should be able to recover very quickly. But now, looking at the tentacles that were quickly reaching down, Xuanhuan felt a little desperate. Thinking of his parents and Yan Ran who was waiting for him to go back and get married, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Goodbye. The next moment, the remaining Yuan power in Yu Zhihan's body began to circulate rapidly in a retrograde direction, finally converging into the dragon beads in his dantian, and an astonishing violent aura began to faintly emit. The people watching the live broadcast on Blue Star were also noisy and excited at this time. Originally, since Yu Zhihan opened his territory, everyone could no longer receive signals. But at this time, Yu Zhihan was seriously injured, and his whole body was almost falling apart. The domain that wrapped around him also dispersed when it hit the barrier. Blue Star's lost signal was naturally reconnected. However, when the connection was first made, before everyone could fully react, there was another violent shaking and loud noise. Later, when everyone looked carefully again, the live view in front of them had turned into a straight passage and a ray of skylight at the end of the passage. What's going on? Good guy. Did Captain Yu enter a deep well? As soon as this statement came out, everyone was slightly stunned. Then they just looked at the long passage and the skylight at the end of the passage. It looked like a deep well. What's going on? Why did Captain Yu go down into the well? Is Captain Yu really good at playing? Suddenly, everyone spoke and joked, but in their hearts, they were very uneasy. Oh! There's no need to comfort yourself like this. Just like what happened just now, Captain Yu was obviously driven into the ground. Tisk. This is the strong man of Shenzhou. What's wrong with the strong man of Shenzhou? If you have the ability, you should also go to the moon. I'm afraid that you would be scared to death and slapped into a pulp when facing such a monster. Ha ha ha, that's right, these foreigners will gloat over other people's misfortunes, but don't they think about what their own situation is? It's really meaningless. Just when everyone was discussing and arguing about Yu Zhihan's situation, the next scene made everyone quiet down again. Looking at the tentacles that were rapidly reaching down with a creepy breath even across the screen, everyone was extremely nervous for a while. Quick! Quick! Move quickly! Get up quickly! Get up quickly and kill that monster quickly! For a while, everyone cheered for Yu Zhihan. And Yanran and others who were also watching the live broadcast were even more worried. There was even a faint light in their eyes, and the speed of hurrying was also a little faster. Well, as Yu Zhihan's girlfriend and his good friend, Yanran, and the others had naturally set out for the moon as soon as Yu Zhihan and the others got into trouble. However, the distance they could move in space each time was also limited, at most only tens of thousands of miles or tens of thousands of miles, and it always took a certain amount of time to reach the moon. However, things happened too quickly, and they were still some time away from the moon, and Yu Zhihan had already suffered a serious injury due to a wrong choice, and was in danger of dying. For a moment, everyone was anxious and began to pray that Yu Zhihan must hold on for a while longer. Unfortunately, no matter how everyone silently prayed or spoke, Yu Zhihan would not be able to receive it, and even Yu Zhihan did not respond to official communications. After all, at this time, Yu Zhihan was already focused on reversing his Yuanli and preparing to self-destruct. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 277. Hee. Little guy, you don't have to be so pessimistic. Just when Yu Zhihan was about to self-destruct, a teasing voice came. Read. Yu Zhihan, who was concentrating on pouring all his energy back to the Dragon Ball in his dantian, was distracted by this. Is there anyone else on the moon? And why does the tone of this person sound so relaxed? Didn't he see the situation in front of him? And because of this voice, Yu Zhihan was distracted. It immediately caused the energy in Yu Zhihan's body to flow in a disordered direction, and even many energy began to operate normally according to the inertia of the flow of energy in the past. This time, it immediately collided with the energy flowing back. Puff! 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 A series of dull sounds came from Yu Zhihan's body, and his face turned a little paler with each sound. Puff. Finally, Yujukan directly spit out a mouthful of reverse blood, his face quickly turned pale, and there was no trace of blood. Ang. Just when Yujukan was suffering from the backlash and was about to die, a dragon roar suddenly came. The dragon roar was vast and heavy, and instantly resounded throughout the moon. On the other side of the moon, Wangshu and other moon gods who were about to rush here also stopped their actions immediately and looked in this direction, with a dazed look. Huh, Zilong is here too? We don't have to worry now. Wangshu looked surprised, but also slightly relieved. It was just that the battle between the little guy and the monster was naturally no problem, and she was not worried at all. But the existence behind the monster was not so easy to deal with. Even if they could win, if they crippled the moon or even completely destroyed it, what would be the point in the end? Now, with the help of Zilong, they can protect the integrity of the moon while fighting. As for the other moon gods, she didn't look down on them, but their strength was really not in her eyes. If they didn't also occupy the status of moon gods, how could Wangshu cooperate with them? At the moment when the dragon roared, the whole time and space seemed to stop. The hideous monsters that were constantly twisting and the tentacles that were quickly extended all stopped at this time, as if they were frightened by the dragon roar and dared not move at all. In the next moment, whether it was the two hideous monsters or the tentacles that were about to get close to their eyes, they all turned into a handful of fine sand and drifted in the air with the wind. Yujukan was stunned and shocked. Is this necessary? The power of this dragon roar is too great. Is there such a big guy on the current blue star? However, what surprised Yujukan was that the sound of this amazing dragon roar made him feel very familiar when he heard it in his ears. Even the chaotic Yuanli in his body became docile at this moment and returned to its normal trajectory. At the same time, along with the vast and deep dragon roar, the space around Yujukan fluctuated, and a small spiritual dragon emerged in an instant, circling around Yujukan, and an invisible buoyancy formed, carrying Yujukan up quickly. In just 2 or 3 breaths, Yujukan had returned to the surface of the moon again, and saw a middle-aged man in a dark green robe, looking at him with a smile. Senior. Looking at this middle-aged man who made him feel kind, Yujukan quickly struggled to get up and bowed respectfully. Not to mention the great strength of this senior, just a dragon roar, he easily annihilated 2 terrifying monsters, and his strength must be far beyond his own, probably those immortal gods who descended. Anyway, Yujukan never knew that in addition to those immortal gods who descended, there was such a terrifying figure on Blue Star. Not to mention, just because he saved his life, it was enough for Yujukan to bow and salute. The middle-aged man did not dodge, but stood there with a smile, and accepted Yujukan's salute. This is his descendant, so there should be nothing wrong with him accepting his salute, right? Although Yujukan also participated in his birth, it was just a trivial influence. He would be born in the end. This is destiny and it is inevitable. Moreover, at the beginning, he gave them a life dragon energy. Otherwise, why would Yujukan be far superior to others in the same realm? Well, that life dragon energy is deeply connected with Zilong. As Zilong's strength realm improves, the essence of those life dragon energy is also improving and transforming little by little. Although because of the fusion with Yujukan and others, these life dragon energy is no longer pure, and it is impossible to get a complete essence transformation. But in the end, it will also make the Yuanli in Yujukan's body far superior to other people of the same realm in terms of quality and strength, which also creates their strength, which is also far superior to others, and can be called invincible in the same realm. The middle-aged man muttered in his heart, but on the surface he remained calm. After Yujukan saluted, he waved his hand slightly, and while helping Yujukan up, there was also a gentle force that instantly penetrated into Yujukan's body, instantly restoring all the injuries in his body. I don't know the senior's surname and where he lives. After the matter is over, the junior will definitely visit me again to express his gratitude. Feeling that the injury had fully recovered, Yu Zhichen couldn't help but look happy, and once again solemnly thanked the middle-aged man. Haha, my home? Then you can't go. As for my name, I think you should have some guesses. The middle-aged man showed a half-smiling look and said playfully. Oh, is that so? That's such a pity. Yu Zhichen looked thoughtful. It seemed that his previous guesses were probably close to 10, so he said with regret. Immediately afterwards, Yu Zhichen thought of the kind feeling he felt in the middle-aged man and the strange phenomenon he had during the previous attack, and then he guessed and said. Senior should be from the dragon clan, right? Or even the ancestor of the dragon clan, the ancestral dragon. Haha, you are quite clever. Well, we will talk about these things later when we have the opportunity. It's time for you to leave now. Xiaolong smiled softly, and then said with a solemn expression. Senior, what is this? Yu Zhichen asked doubtfully. Hey, you don't think that the changes here are because of those two little bugs, do you? Ah. Hearing Xiaolong's words, Yu Zhichen was slightly stunned, and then he remembered that the mist generated on the moon was a high-energy existence with extremely high energy levels. Even his own chaos domain cannot have much impact on it. As for the two monsters, although I couldn't kill them easily, they were not so different from each other. And his own attack can even cause fatal damage to him. Comparing the two, it is obvious that the fog that fills the moon is definitely not caused by these two monsters. In fact, these two monsters were born because of this diffuse mist. After thinking about this, Yu Zhichen's expression instantly became serious. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 278. Then Senior Yu. When he heard that there was someone behind the scenes, but Xiaolong had no intention of leaving, Yu Zhichen asked hesitantly. Me? Do you think that I can do nothing about this and have my divine power diluted by an unknown amount? Xiaolong was a little disdainful of Yu Zhichen's inquiry. Divine power? Yu Zhichen looked at the mist surrounding him in disbelief. He knew that the fog must have an extraordinary origin, but he never expected that it turned out to be diluted divine power. Yeah. What's the problem with that? Regarding Yu Zhichen's shock, Xiaolong said somewhat indifferently. Is there any problem? This is a big problem, okay. Divine power, this is divine power, how can you be so calm? But when he thought about the identity of the person in front of him, he was the ancestral dragon of the prehistoric world and an ordinary god, so naturally he didn't take it into consideration. Thinking of this, Yu Zhichen calmed down his excitement. Xiaolong didn't care about it? This is the most normal behavior. Is this what divine power is like? Yu Zhichen looked at the fog around him and frowned. This magical power seemed too ordinary. Then what do you think divine power will be like? As long as these divine powers are not actively or passively stimulated, they will not behave so magically. Unless this is an evil god with chaotic mind, the divine power he releases will always be powerful. And with that kind of power, as a little guy like you who has not touched the rules, I am afraid that it will be eroded by pollution and distorted into his dependent puppet. Xiaolong looked at the fog around him and explained very calmly. Oh, is that so? Yu Zhichen nodded thoughtfully, thinking that this is normal. With the level of the gods, if they want to appear in front of others without being noticed, then it should be very normal for them to restrain their divine power. If, as gods, they are unable to restrain their own strength and cannot appear normally in front of people, then that would be a little abnormal, and a little unworthy of the height of their realm. Even the distortions of those people before were probably caused deliberately by this divine power. As for why, Yu Zhichen and others in the Shattering Void realm were not affected by the erosion of these divine powers. I'm afraid it's because of some special reason, not because these divine powers can't do it. However, when Yu Zhichen thought about this, He also thought that since there is the existence of divine power, there must be the existence of gods after it. Facing a real god, and a god that is obviously not friendly to humans, what can Blue Star humans do to compete? Well, you can't say that. In front of you, isn't there an existence that is not inferior to the gods, and may even be stronger? And if he appears here, he must not be here specifically to save himself, right? Zilong must have had his own purpose when he came to the moon. Perhaps the reason why the ancestral dragon came to the moon is because of the spirit behind the mist. There will even be conflicts or even battles between them. Thinking of this, Yu Zhichuan's expression moved slightly and he looked at Zilong in front of him. Thinking of Zilong letting him leave before, it was obviously because of the battle between the gods, and it was far from the reason that he, a little shrimp, could participate. Thinking of this, Yu Zhichuan looked astonished. Although Yu Zhichuan also wanted to watch the battle between gods, he still had some self-awareness. I know that with my current level of strength, let alone watching the battle between them at close range, I am afraid that even if I watch it through the screen, I may not be able to bear the principles that are spilled out when they fight. That would cause one's Taoist heart to collapse and suffer the backlash of the rules. Not to mention dying, it would definitely be a complete waste. And no matter which one it was not what Yu Zhichuan wanted to see. Therefore, when Zilong asked him to leave, Yu Zhichuan was not reluctant, but was extremely eager to leave. It was best to go as far as possible. He even felt that even if he left the moon and returned to the Blue Star, it would not be unsafe. After all, Blue Star is too close to the moon. With the power of the gods, if they let their hands and feet fight, wouldn't it be a matter of waving their hands to destroy a planet or even a galaxy? So Zilong and the others are fighting on the moon, and what will happen to Blue Star, which is adjacent to the moon? However, besides returning to Blue Star, he seems to have no other good solution. Not to mention that with his current strength, even if he wanted to escape alone, where could he escape? No matter how fast he is, can he be faster than those gods? What's more, although Blue Star is extremely close to the moon, there are many gods on Blue Star. When the two sides fight, perhaps Blue Star, which seems to be the most dangerous, will be the safest place. Thinking of this, Yu Zhichuan's desire to leave and return to Blue Star couldn't help but become more urgent. However, thinking of what happened when he wanted to leave before, Yu Zhichuan smiled bitterly again. "Senior, I do want to leave, but..." When talking about this, Yu Zhichuan couldn't help but look at the top of the moon. "Oh. Haha, you don't have to worry about this, just leave." Zilong glanced at it casually and understood what Yu Zhichuan meant, and said with a casual smile. "Okay, then, Senior, I will take my leave now. If there is an opportunity in the future, I will definitely try my best to repay Senior for saving his life." After listening to Zilong's words, Yu Zhichuan did not doubt anything. He solemnly bowed his hands and clasped his fists in a salute, then immediately jumped into the air, with a layer of realm emerging around him, and quickly flew away from the moon. Well, although Zilong had said not to worry, the previous experience still made Yu Zhichuan feel uneasy, and he couldn't help but expand his field. Moreover, although the speed of his flight this time was still extremely fast, it was more than 2 or 3 times slower than the last time. When Yu Zhichuan came to the last barrier again, he paused for a moment, then flew upward again. This time without any obstruction, Yu Zhichuan had already flown out of the gravitational range of the moon and arrived in outer space again. At this moment, Zilong's instructions came to Yu Zhichuan's ears again. "Boy, when you return to Blue Star, tell the higher UPS in your world that it is best not to observe the changes of the moon through those satellites or other means." Yu Zhichuan paused slightly and looked back at the moon, which had become a bit misty. Then he stopped hesitating and instantly turned into a stream of light, flying quickly towards the Blue Star. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 279. Not long after leaving the moon, Yujukan met the people who came to support him. Read. Looking at Zhao Eli, who was standing in the void, Yujukan walked up and hugged him. Good brother. Then, Yujukan looked at Yanran, who was standing aside, with tears in her eyes, but smiling at him. Yanran. Akan. The two hugged each other tightly, saying a lot of things, but at this time they just called each other's names. After a long while, the two reluctantly let go, and smiled at everyone a little embarrassedly. In response, everyone also smiled kindly and didn't care. And everyone, thank you very much for coming to support. Then, Yujukan's expression became serious, and he solemnly bowed to everyone and bowed. I think these people have also seen the environment they are in through the live broadcast. Otherwise, everyone would not go to the moon from that space channel, but would take a long way and come across space. Obviously, he also knew the difficulty of the fog. The fog that can corrode the soul, turn people into puppets, and even deform people into monsters, and cannot be blocked by anything, is almost completely unsolvable. At least it is not something they can resist now. After all, it is transformed by divine power. Although it is divine power diluted countless times, it is still divine power. It is essentially different and absolutely not something that ordinary people can resist. Don't look at him now. There is no change, but who knows what he is like inside now. The existence of the God level, every move is not something they can spy on. Even if the gods do something, they can't detect it. And now, since these people can still come to rescue, it is a great favor, which is worth remembering by Yujukan. After greeting everyone for a while, Yujukan and others returned to Blue Star together. And during the time when Yujukan and others returned to Blue Star, Yujukan also took the opportunity to understand that the current situation of Blue Star is mainly due to the impact of their live broadcast. At the beginning, the entire Blue Star was roughly divided into two factions. One faction was the people of Shenzhou and those who were close to Shenzhou, most of whom were happy and blessed. The other faction was naturally those who boycotted Shenzhou. They naturally made all kinds of negative comments about Shenzhou crossing the space and landing on the moon. After the monster appeared, most of the humans on Blue Star turned to support Yujukan and others. After all, it was a battle between humans and other creatures. Deep down, everyone naturally sided with humans. Now, when everyone knew that there were gods on the moon and even the possibility of a war between gods, they became a little panicked. There was also the mist that spread to Blue Star through the space channel. The diluted divine power was also after the space channel was closed. It was immediately targeted by the instinctive aura of heaven and earth. A large amount of aura of heaven and earth gathered, rendering the location of the secret base into a cloud and mist wonderland. It even began to collide violently with the spreading divine power, and they squeezed and annihilated each other, and bloomed layers of light and divine brilliance. The entire base was illuminated like a fairyland. If it weren't for the dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth, which served as a shield and filter, the divine power that began to bloom would even pollute most of the people present, and even distort the energy into various monsters. However, compared with the diluted divine power whose source had been cut off, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was surging and endless. Soon, the diluted divine power was completely annihilated. Then, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth slowly dissipated. However, such a large-scale gathering of spiritual energy of heaven and earth, even if it dissipated quickly, still made many people present break through their own realms, which was also a comfort for this disaster. After Yujukan left, the Zilong on the moon looked in the direction of Wangshu and other moon gods. Daiyu, what do I want? I believe you should know it very well. How about cooperation between you and me? Okay. A cold voice came, and agreed to Zalong's cooperation very straightforwardly. After all, cooperation between the two sides is the best choice for both sides. Sisters, please follow me to cast a spell. After agreeing to Zalong, Wangshu turned around and said to the moon gods following him. Okay. Since it has been decided that they will work together with their own strength, with Wangshu as the main force, to build the moon together and build the foundation of themselves in this world. Then for Wangshu's decision, many moon gods did not hesitate much and agreed very straightforwardly. As everyone agreed, they began to operate their divine power one after another, and the hazy moonlight and divine aura fell, constantly stabilizing the stability of the moon under their feet, making the entire moon slowly transform into the moon in mythology. Of course, these are secondary. The main purpose of these moon gods is to stabilize the moon to prevent it from being broken in the battle between gods, and to cover the moon. This is to prevent the humans on Blue Star from being affected by the divine will leak during the battle between the two sides and being deformed into monsters, or being eroded by the divine will and assimilated into their followers. I saw that with the actions of Wangshu and the other moon gods, the moon had become hazy and no longer reflected much sunlight. It required careful observation on the earth to be able to vaguely see some of the moon. At this time, it began to return to its former bright appearance little by little, and the moonlight shining down was no longer a simple reflection of the sun's rays, but truly contained some of the power of the lunar moonlight. This is no longer like before. The ordinary moonlight shines on Blue Star, and is forcibly transformed by the rules of Blue Star that have revived. The power of the moonlight. The lunar moonlight that fell this time was emanating directly from the moon. In other words, the power of Wangshu and the other moon gods, after absorbing a large amount of energy such as sunlight, transformed it into the power of the lunar moonlight, and then spread and radiated it. At this time, ordinary creatures on the Blue Star, when they look at the moon, will not be distorted or eroded due to the battle between the two sides. On the contrary, you will get a lot of benefits. Even if you practice facing the moon, you can draw in some of the power of the lunar moonlight, deepen your cultivation, and purify your energy. Of course, this is only a phenomenon that occurs when observing with the naked eye normally on a blue star. If we use various means such as satellites to observe what is happening in the moon in a more detailed and in-depth manner, the consequences will be difficult to predict. This is why Zalong reminded Yu Zhizhen that it is best not to try to observe their battle through satellites and other means. Yu Zhizhen was not reminded of the reason why everyone hid in places where the moon could not be seen at all and could not be illuminated by the moonlight. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 280. In the mist all over the sky, mixed with the falling wisps of moonlight, Zalong walked on the moon, walking slowly in one direction. Take one step at a time, relaxed and freehand, like a leisurely walk after a meal. However, Zalong often takes one step and is thousands of meters away, like a fairy riding the mist and soaring into the clouds. In just a few steps, he has reached the back of the moon. After walking a few more steps, Zalong smiled softly as he looked at the space-time cracks in front of him that were constantly pouring out the mist of divine power. Found it? However, this god is really cautious. After discovering the time and space rift leading to another world, not only did he come in person, but he didn't even come in his incarnation or will. He just sent his own divine power through this crack in time and space. Moreover, even this divine power has been continuously diluted and downgraded, leaving only some simple instructions, and they are developed as much as possible without being exposed. And this is why these divine powers only corrode and assimilate those with low-level cultivation, but do not corrode and assimilate those who are in the void-breaking realm. Just because Yu Zhizhen and the others, after reaching the realm of breaking the void, were infected with the atmosphere of some rules. To be on the safe side, the mechanical mist of divine power had just not infected Yu Zhizhen and the others. After all, who knows if these guys who are contaminated by the rules are the descendants of a certain god? If it arouses the idea of a god and is expelled from this world, then the gain outweighs the loss. Of course, in order to make up for the mechanical rigidity of those divine mist, the god on the opposite side still put in 2 of the top god's followers. However, due to the suppression of the rules of this world, their power cannot be fully deployed. Even beings like Xuanhuan who have not yet reached the pinnacle of the human world are unable to defeat them. It's a pity that the gods on the opposite side probably didn't expect that he was just about to officially erode due to the appearance of humans. Then a being that surpassed ordinary gods arrived, and easily wiped out the 2 gods' relatives. They even traced the diffusion trajectory of the divine mist and directly found this space-time rift, the source of the divine mist. But for those divine mist that only had some simple instincts did not have any reaction. Anyway, even if someone wipes out these divine mist, it will not have any impact on this god. Even if someone finds that space-time rift, after seeing the divine mist and knowing that there is a god on the other side, probably no one will dare to enter easily. But the god on the opposite side can figure out the approximate strength here based on the final results of these divine powers. If that divine power could be wiped out easily, it would naturally mean that there were gods here, and he would need to deal with it carefully. And if even those downgraded divine powers cannot cope with it, it means that the existence found here has not reached the level of gods, then he can do whatever he wants. This is too cautious. It's okay for you to be an incarnation now. Feeling the situation here, Zilong muttered speechlessly. However, this is not impossible, he. Zilong showed a weird smile, stretched out his palm and turned it slightly. Immediately, an energy vortex full of pulling force was formed above his palm. The next moment, as the vortex rotated rapidly, the surrounding divine mist began to slowly converge towards the vortex, and the speed became faster and faster. By the end, the rotation speed of the energy vortex had reached an extremely exaggerated level. Along with bursts of buzzing, even the space near the energy vortex began to twist violently, and the gravity became exaggerated, like a small black hole held in the palm of the ancestral dragon. The entire moon's divine mist was drawn by it and began to gather towards it quickly, and finally merged into the energy vortex. Finally, with Zilong's thoughts, the energy vortex slowly stopped and finally dissipated. At this time, the entire moon's divine mist had been gathered by the ancestral dragon and turned into a divine power mass, which was held in the palm of his hand and glowing slightly. Obviously, the gathering of a large amount of divine power has caused the divine power that would not have manifested visions to begin to shine with the brilliance of the divine power of the gods. Divine power is the source, cause and effect is the guide. Looking at the divine light group in front of him, Zilong murmured in a low voice, and the power of the heavenly Lord surged around him. Under the divine light group, a complex array was formed, with mysterious radiance flowing. And gradually resonated with that divine power, began to transcend the barriers of endless time and space dimensions, and resonated and pulled with the God who existed in the other world. As the power of resonance and pulling increased, little bits of light began to emerge above the divine light group, slowly descending and integrating into the divine light group. Seeing this scene, Zilong couldn't help but smile. It's done. Who said there are only 2 ways to destroy that divine power, or to just let it go? We can also choose another method, using the same source of divine power as attraction, to force a part of the consciousness of the alien god to descend and form an incarnation of divine power. As for whether the god himself agrees, with the means of the Tianzun realm and the fact that Zilong has half of the home field advantage in this world, he can still barely do this. On the other side of the moon, Wangshu and others who were also paying attention to this place also breathed a sigh of relief, and the power of the heavenly venerable and the moonlight divine power in their bodies also began to increase their output. This made the sky and the earth of the entire moon strengthen at an astonishing speed, and they were rapidly moving towards the strength that could withstand the battle of the gods. Buzz buzz buzz. As more and more light merged into the divine light ball, the divine light ball on the magic circle began to tremble slightly, and there were bursts of buzzing. Finally, the divine light ball suddenly burst out with a brilliant divine light, broke free from the shackles of the magic circle, and moved away from the location of the ancestor dragon. Buzz. Accompanied by a buzzing tremor, the divine light of the divine light ball became more dazzling, and began to slowly deform, and finally turned into an incarnation of a god surrounded by divine light. The thick limbs, strong and powerful, with a hideous head that looked like a human face, and at the first moment of landing, it let out a dull roar. Although he didn't understand why he suddenly descended into a part of this world's consciousness, he still responded immediately. The invisible sound waves spread, infecting and changing the rules of the world, and turning the surrounding area towards the direction of his kingdom of God. A single eye on the head, shining with brilliant divine light, thoroughly analyzing the rules of this world, wanting to bring it under his control. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 281. Oh, the Realm of the Kingdom of God. Feeling the change in the surrounding environment, Zalong curled his lips slightly, looking a little disdainful. Forcibly changing the rules of the world is too rough. As soon as Zalong thought, his most fundamental Tianzundao circulated and began to penetrate into the outside world, preparing to assimilate into the rules of the outside world, so that it could reach a state of harmony in which heaven and earth are for me, I am heaven and earth, heaven and man are one, and control the world. However, before he could make any move, the rules of the world around him had all shaken, and a vast and majestic force erupted, shrouding the incarnation of the god. Buzz. The power of the rules vibrated, directly sealing the sky and the earth, blocking the power of the incarnation of the god. In an instant, the divine brilliance bloomed by the incarnation of the god quickly dimmed. The rules of heaven and earth that were originally changing towards the rules of the kingdom of God were quickly reversed, and together with the normal rules of heaven and earth, blocked all the power of this incarnation of the god. This makes this incarnation of a god no longer able to use even a single bit of power to reach the level of a god. Now, this incarnation of the god is only equivalent to the peak power in the human world. Compared to before, it's not just one level lower, it's basically two completely different dimensions. The ultimate power in the world sounds very powerful. But in fact, even when facing the weakest gods, there is absolutely no possibility of confrontation, and there is no comparison. Well, the scene that happened in front of them, whether it was the incarnation of the god, the ancestral dragon, Wangshu and other moon gods, were all stunned. Immediately, everyone realized that these alien gods who had descended would have been suppressed by the rules of heaven and earth. It could be said that every move they made would be noticed by the rules of heaven and earth. Even Zalong and the others, although they have various connections with Blue Star, can be regarded as half of Blue Star's gods. But when they came to Blue Star, they would also be suppressed to a certain extent. However, as time passed, they were able to quickly adapt to the environment of Blue Star and regain control of the corresponding rules and powers. Moreover, like Zalong and the others, they integrate their own Tao in a gentler way, assimilate the rules of heaven and earth, and achieve a state similar to the harmony of Tao, which really does not cause too much backlash from the rules of heaven and earth. However, if the incarnation of the god who has just arrived directly forcibly erodes the rules of heaven and earth and changes the existence of existing rules, it will inevitably lead to a strong backlash from the rules of heaven and earth, leading to a riot in the rules of heaven and earth and direct suppression. After feeling his own situation and seeing the half-smiling look on the opposite side of the ancestral dragon, the god turned around and ran away without any hesitation. However, it had just started. When it was still some distance away from the space-time channel, Zalong had already made a move. "You've already come, so why rush to leave?" Looking at the incarnation of the god who was about to escape in a hurry, Zalong smiled lightly and said very casually. With the state of the incarnation of the god in front of him, it was absolutely impossible to escape from his grasp. This was something they had never thought of before, and all the extensive preparations were in vain. After all, this is the first time that the incarnations of gods from other worlds have arrived. And as soon as it comes up, it directly and violently changes the rules of the world. As for their gods, although they are not the gods of the Blue Star world, they should still be closely related. Otherwise, there would be no legends about them in the Blue Star world. It should be this obscure connection that caused them to be suppressed to a certain extent when they came to Blue Star, but it was not as exaggerated as this incarnation of the god. In addition, at the beginning of their arrival, they all slowly adapted to the Blue Star environment, and they did not violently change the rules of the world as soon as they came to this world like this god. Naturally, it will not cause a strong backlash against world rules, resurgence of direct rules, and forcible suppression. Certainly. The words along spat out, and the incarnation of the god that was speeding towards the rift in time and space stopped in an instant, as if it were a lifelike stone sculpture, and was directly frozen in place. Of course, although the incarnation of the god was suppressed by the rules of heaven and earth, this ordinary magical power of fixation could still fix his body. However, his actual essence is there after all. Therefore, in just one breath, he was already trying to break free from the shackles of his magical power. However, how could Zalong make it happen? I saw Zalong wave his big hand, and the surrounding space changed hazily. In an instant, Tianzun Dao spread, directly incarnating the god, separating it from the surrounding space, and tightly trapping it. Ho! Bang! The trapped incarnation of the spirit erupted with a shocking roar, and immediately hit the space barrier directly, making a loud noise that shook the space barrier that trapped it. But, that's all. Hee. Zalong smiled softly, stretched out his hand and guided the space cage that trapped the incarnation of the god, and flew towards his palm, getting smaller and smaller. Finally, it turned into a crystal ball the size of a fist, which was firmly held in Zalong's hand. Looking at the space-time crack in front of him, Zalong groaned for a moment, and then ignored it, but turned his head to look behind him. Let's study it together. I didn't contribute to this battle, which is a bit inappropriate. Wangshu, who came behind Zalong, shook his head slightly and refused. What's wrong with this? Since it is a cooperation agreed in advance, no matter how much contribution is made, the final results will be shared. Zalong was very dissatisfied with Wangshu's refusal. Next, Zalong did not speak, but sat cross-legged directly, tossed the space cage in his hand, and directly waved his hand to release the incarnation of the god again. However, the space cage did not dissipate, and it still firmly suppressed the incarnation of the god, but it did not hinder others at all. Zalong's eyes shone with brilliant divine light, and he began to analyze the rules contained in this incarnation of the god bit by bit. Seeing the actions of Zalong, Wangshu hesitated for a moment, and finally, clouds appeared under his body, and he sat cross-legged. The moonlight was hazy around him, and the shadow of the bright moon flashed in his eyes. He also began to analyze the rules of this incarnation of the god. And the moon gods who had also come here looked at Wangshu and Zalong, and then looked at the incarnation of the god suppressed by the space cage. All of them couldn't help but shine their eyes, and they couldn't help but quietly analyze the rules of the incarnation of the god. And for these, neither Zalong nor Wangshu meant to stop them. After all, although Wangshu and Zalong were the main ones, they also participated. Naturally, they were also qualified to participate in the analysis of this incarnation of the god, which was different from the rules of Blue Star and many worlds in the chaos. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 282. Ho! I am a god, you can't do this to me. Looking outside the space cage, Facing the kind of people he was watching, the incarnation of the god couldn't help but let out an angry roar. Read. With the level and personality of reaching the realm of gods, even if they speak different languages, they can still be easily analyzed, so naturally there will be no language barrier. It's a pity that even if Zilong and the others clearly understood what he meant, no one paid attention to his incompetence and rage. How could anyone give up this opportunity to be exposed to completely different rules? As for whether it was disrespectful to treat an incarnation of a god like this. Haha, what kind of grace is there for such an intruder? As for them, they are also the gods of the prehistoric world and other worlds in chaos, not the local gods of this world. Anyway, they were the first ones to arrive, and they had already laid a very solid foundation. Then the arrival of gods that are completely different from theirs in other worlds would naturally be considered an invasion. Moreover, Zilong and the others believed that if they and others were caught, the consequences would definitely not be much better. Over time, more and more different rules were parsed by them. Finally, everyone opened their eyes one after another, exhaled a sigh of relief, and showed a look of joy. This completely different rule can indeed bring them great inspiration. Just some of the most superficial rules have already made their strength slightly improve. After taking a look at the many moon gods who were still immersed in the analysis of the rules, Zilong and Wangshu glanced at each other, and then turned their eyes to the incarnation of the gods in the space cage, showing a look of desire. The rules possessed by an incarnation of a god are not just superficial rules. Although the incarnation of a god is far inferior to the original god in nature, the rules it possesses are definitely deeply embedded in the rules of the world. If they can fully analyze it, then not only their cultivation realm will definitely be able to take a big step forward again. Moreover, as they incorporated those rules into their own Tianzun Taoism, then it also means that I can also have a certain right to speak in that world and mobilize the power of this kind of rules. You can even use this as an opportunity and springboard to secretly invade that world and slowly embed your own heavenly principles into the rules of that world. Thinking of this, the eyes of Zilong and Wangshu couldn't help but become a little hotter. What do you want to do? Don't mess around. I will not let you go. With your strength, you will never be able to stop my conquest. I advise you. Seeing the appearance of Zilong and Wangshu, the incarnation of the god couldn't help but tense up, tremble uncontrollably, and growl with some fierceness. Oh, you don't need to persuade me, why not just summon your true self directly? However, Zilong didn't pay attention to his fierce and angry roar. Instead, he teased him with an expectant tone without waiting for him to finish. Wangshu said nothing, but nodded his head, obviously expecting that this incarnation of the god could summon his true self. Well, seeing the expectant expressions of Zilong and Wangshu, the incarnation of the spirit was speechless for a moment. Summon the deity to come? That is naturally impossible. Judging from the situation just now, even if his true form comes, he will still be targeted by the world and become weak under the suppression of the rules of the world. Even if he doesn't fall directly to the entire realm and become immortal like his incarnation, it will definitely not be easy. With his strength, which was suppressed by the rules of the world at that time, he was no match for the two gods in front of him at most. He might even capsize in the gutter and be trapped in this world by them gathering those gods. Looking at the silent incarnation of the god, Zilong and Wangshu were both a little disappointed. In that case, let's start. Zilong sighed in disappointment, then stretched out his big hand, passed through the space cage, and entered the body of the incarnation of the god. If we just analyze it from the outside world, we can at best analyze some of the rules that appear on the surface of this incarnation of the god. If you want a more in-depth analysis, you must go deeper. Wangshu on the other side also stretched out his jade hand, passed through the space cage, and submerged into the body of the incarnation of the god. When Zilong and Wangshu began to analyze the deeper rules, the incarnation of the god immediately burst out with a painful roar. If you just simply break open the body of the incarnation of the god, even if it feels a little uncomfortable, it won't be a big deal. After all, his incarnation is nothing more than the aggregation of divine power, which can naturally be gathered and dispersed. Even if it penetrates his body, it will not cause any harm to him. However, Zilong and Wangshu's analysis of deeper rules must touch part of his soul consciousness. After all, if you want to analyze deeper rules, you must naturally come into contact with deeper rules. And those divine powers are bound to be unable to carry deep-level rules. Otherwise, there is no need for Zilong to go to great lengths to force the incarnation of this god to come. What can carry the deep-level rules must be the soul consciousness of this god's incarnation. Zilong and Wangshu went deep into his soul consciousness to analyze the rules, which was no less than tearing his soul consciousness apart. They searched for it in his soul consciousness. The pain of tearing the soul consciousness apart was unbearable even for a god. If his entire incarnation, including his soul consciousness, had not been firmly suppressed and locked by the rules of the world in the world of Blue Star, and could not directly disperse the incarnation and return to the original body, he would have dispersed the incarnation and returned long ago. Shhh. Ah. Accompanied by a tearing sound, the incarnation of the god was in extreme pain, and the divine power in his body was boiling to the extreme. Finally, after another painful roar, the whole body was scattered, and cracks appeared one after another. However, there were also chains of rules that kept moving inside and outside his incarnation, locking his aura and divinity, including all his divine power, and could not leave his body at all. This kind of blockade and suppression by the rules locked up his power, and at the same time made his body extremely stable, although his body was repeatedly broken and torn apart. However, he was always suppressed by the rules, and he really couldn't live or die. Unlike ordinary incarnations of gods, as long as the consciousness collapsed, then his incarnation body composed of divine power would instantly break apart and turn into scattered divine power again. However, for this god at this time, it is better to have such an almost immortal incarnation than to have his body broken apart and his soul annihilated. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 283. As Zilong and Wangshu analyzed the soul consciousness of the incarnation of the god regardless of anything, and analyzed the rules contained in it. This also made his divine power and soul consciousness in a state of intense turbulence. Gradually, this state reached a peak, and finally, bang! Bang! The rule chains that bound the power of the incarnation of the god began to break one by one, and the strands of divine power brilliance bloomed again and began to spread to the surroundings. Bang! With a loud bang, the incarnation of the god directly exploded and collapsed, and all the divine power was blooming with divine light and self-dissolving. Because this god knew very well that as long as he was in this world, no matter what kind of attack he made, he could not defeat the two people in front of him. Instead of constantly humiliating himself and enduring the pain of the soul again, it is better to directly dissolve himself and leave some dignity. Suppress. Looking at the body of the incarnation of the god in front of them, it suddenly collapsed and disappeared. Zilong and Wangshu shouted at almost the same time. An invisible power of the heavenly Lord spread, and instantly enveloped the space cage in front of them. After the body of the incarnation of the god collapsed and disappeared, his soul consciousness was also going to collapse and dissipate. However, the power of the heavenly Lord brought down by Zilong and the others suppressed his soul consciousness that was about to collapse, so that it remained roughly intact. Feeling his own situation, the incarnation of the god, who still had a hazy consciousness, couldn't help but curse in his heart. These two guys are really too much, actually treating an incarnation of a god like this. In their world, facing such an incarnation of a god, it is directly broken up, and no one has ever analyzed the soul consciousness bit by bit like Zilong and the others. It's a pity that no matter how angry he is, and how much he curses in his heart, it can't change his ending. On the contrary, because of his operation, his body disintegrated and his soul consciousness was also close to collapse. The various rules carried on his soul consciousness instantly floated to the surface and became clearly visible, without Zilong and others looking for and analyzing them bit by bit. Well, in this way, he would not be too painful. Then, Zilong and Wangshu quickly analyzed all the rules existing on the incarnation of the god. Even the other moon gods except them also gained great benefits and made great progress because of the various rules that began to flow to the surface in the end. Then, looking at the soul consciousness that was firmly suppressed in the space cage again, Zilong waved his hand, dispersed the space cage, and also removed the power of the heavenly venerable in it. Wangshu looked at Zilong and also removed the power of the heavenly venerable at the same time, which made the soul consciousness of the god breathe a sigh of relief, revealing a touch of relief, and collapsed and dissipated in an instant. Seeing the final relief of the divine consciousness, even Zilong showed a trace of embarrassment. This was the incarnation of a divine spirit. Was it not good to be treated like this by them? However, when he saw Wangshu's still cold skills, Zilong's expression instantly became serious. There was nothing wrong with using some tricks to pursue the great way. What's more, this was just the incarnation of the divine spirit, and it would not hurt his original body, so what did it matter? Even because the soul consciousness of this incarnation had completely collapsed and annihilated, even his original body might not be able to detect the slightest situation here, and would not suffer any pain. If you think about it this way, it seems that there is no problem at all. Then, Zilong bowed to Wangshu and turned away. In just one step, Zilong had passed through the moon, reached the numerous spaces of Blue Star, and landed on the East China Sea of Blue Star again. Wangshu and others who stayed on the moon began to implement their own moon transformation plan. With Wangshu as the core, many moon gods assisted, and all the moon god positions in the Blue Star gathered in an instant. A perfect, bright moon slowly emerged on the moon. And under Wangshu's control, it began to fall towards the moon under their feet, and merged into the moon little by little. And with the integration of the bright moon, this satellite that has been rotating around the Blue Star and is desolate began to change little by little. Stars of spiritual light began to emerge on the moon, and Wangshu's Taiyan rules were embedded in the ocean of rules of the moon little by little. Becoming the ocean of rules in the world where the Blue Star is located, a kind of operating rules belonging to the node of the moon, changing the manifestation of the rules of the moon little by little. Wangshu did not usurp and change the inherent rules of the moon, she just embedded her own rules and slightly changed the manifestation of the rules of the moon. The rules of the entire moon began to absorb the infinite energy from the depths of the ocean of rules, slowly transformed into the power of the Taiyan, and formed an invisible force field that encompassed the entire moon. The formation of this force field is more of an effect on the moon. For the outside world, this layer of force field basically has no great effect, and still maintains the original gravity of the moon, so that its orbit around the blue planet has not changed at all. But on the moon, earth-shaking changes have taken place. Wangshu was presiding over the evolution of the entire lunar rules, and the other moon gods were not idle either. Although they all used their own moon god status to cooperate with Wangshu to transform the moon. But they still had some power to control the lunar rules. Even with the continuous evolution of the lunar rules, their power to control the lunar rules was constantly strengthening. Therefore, they also began to control the lunar rules and change the lunar environment little by little. First, the power of the moon's moonlight filled the entire moon. Then, after the force field outside the moon was formed, they began to use the power of the moon's moonlight to derive the atmosphere belonging to the moon. Because of the restraint of the force field outside the moon, the atmosphere on the moon will not dissipate. This made the moon begin to have its own atmosphere and atmosphere. After the formation of the atmosphere, under the control of many moon gods, dark clouds began to gather, and raindrops fell, moistening the dry moon. Finally, streams and lakes were formed on the moon. As for the ocean, it would be difficult to form it with the moon's environmental area, unless they changed the moon's continental environment on a large scale. It was just that there was no need for that. It was enough to form streams and lakes on the moon so that it had the foundation for the birth of life.